The silent cities. Imagine a world carved from dust and sun, where massive stone cities hang suspended in the air, tucked into the sheer faces of red rock cliffs. These are not mere ruins, they are the ghosts of a civilization that mastered the American Southwest long before the modern world took root. High above the canyon floors, these silent structures remain as a testament to the ancestral Puebloans, the first great architects of the North American desert. For decades, we knew them by a name that wasn't theirs, the Anasazi. It was a Navajo word meaning ancient enemies, but history is finally listening to the people who stayed behind. Today, we recognize them as the brilliant ancestors of the Hopi, the Zuni, and the Pueblo people. To their descendants, these stones are not abandoned, they are living footprints, sacred spaces where the breath of their grandfathers still lingers in the desert wind. Their stage was the Four Corners, a 150,000 square mile expanse where the borders of Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado collide. It is a land of brutal extremes, where the summer sun cracked the earth and winter snows buried the canyons. In a wilderness where water was more precious than gold, they achieved the impossible. They transformed dry mesas into thriving cornfields and turned raw sandstone into multi-story skyscrapers that rivaled the grandest structures of the ancient world. They left behind no written scrolls, but they carved their story into the very alignment of the stars. Their temples and great houses were built with surgical precision to track the movements of the sun and the moon, acting as massive celestial clocks for a society in perfect harmony with the cosmos. Yet at the absolute height of their power and architectural glory, the heartbeat of these cities suddenly stopped. They walked away from their homes, leaving behind their pottery, their tools, and a mystery that still haunts the canyons today. The journey into the silence has begun. The Weaver's Revolution. Before the great stone towers touched the clouds, the story of the ancestral Puebloans began in the shadows of the earth. Thousands of years ago, they were not builders, but wanderers, nomadic hunters following the rhythm of the seasons across the high desert. But a single seed changed everything. The introduction of corn from the south forced a choice: keep moving or stay and grow. They chose to stay, and in doing so, they triggered a cultural explosion that would redefine human survival in the wilderness. During this era, known as the basket maker period, they became the ultimate masters of the desert's resources. Without metal tools or pottery, they turned the fibers of the yucca plant and wild grasses into high art. They wove baskets so tight they could hold water, and sandals so durable they could traverse the jagged canyon floors. Every stitch was a survival strategy, every weave a testament to their growing sophistication. They were no longer just surviving the landscape, they were beginning to shape it. As their reliance on agriculture grew, their homes moved underground. They engineered pit houses, circular dwellings dug deep into the soil to harness the earth's natural insulation. These subterranean homes kept them cool during the 100-degree desert summers and warm during the sub-zero winters. It was here, in the dark, cool earth, that the first communal bonds were forged. Life was centered around the hearth, and for the first time, a sense of permanent home took root in the American Southwest. But then came the next great leap. The discovery of clay and the invention of the bow and arrow transformed their world once again. The intricate baskets gave way to beautifully painted pottery, and the pit houses began to rise above the surface. They started stacking stone and mud, moving from the safety of the earth toward the ambition of the sky. The foundations were being laid for something much larger, a golden age of architecture that would soon turn the Four Corners into the cultural heartbeat of the continent. The Star Aligners of Chaco. By the year 900 AD, the scattered villages of the desert had evolved into something monumental. The heartbeat of this world moved to a remote, sun-scorched valley in New Mexico known as Chaco Canyon. Here, the ancestral Puebloans didn't just build houses,
They engineered a sprawling ceremonial metropolis that functioned as the spiritual and political capital of the Four Corners. This was their Manhattan, a massive hub of trade and power that connected hundreds of miles of desert through a sophisticated network of prehistoric roads. At the center of this world stood the Great Houses, colossal stone structures like Pueblo Bonito, reaching 4 stories high with over 600 rooms. These were the largest buildings in North America until the 19th century. But Chaco was more than just stone and mortar. It was a giant observatory. Every wall, every doorway, and every plaza was built with terrifying precision to align with the sun and the moon. On the summer solstice, a sun dagger of light would pierce through rock slabs to strike a spiral petroglyph, marking the exact moment the season shifted. Inside these walls, a luxury trade flourished that spanned continents. Archaeologists have unearthed the remains of scarlet macaws and cacao from the rainforests of Mexico, and turquoise and seashells from the distant coasts. Chaco was a magnet for the ancient world, a place where thousands gathered for massive religious festivals and celestial ceremonies. At the center of every great house lay the kiva, a sacred circular underground chamber where the smoke of cedar fires rose to the heavens, connecting the people to the world below and the stars above. Yet Chaco remains a haunting enigma. Despite its massive size, very few people actually lived there year-round. It was a city of ghosts and pilgrims, a place of high ritual and cosmic command. But as the 12th century dawned, something shifted. The pristine roads began to see less traffic, and the master architects started looking toward the cliffs. The golden age was reaching its zenith, but the shadows of change were growing longer, setting the stage for a desperate move into the walls of the canyons.
The fortress in the stone. By the mid-1200s, the grand open plazas of Chaco Canyon had fallen silent, and the atmosphere of the Four Corners shifted from celebration to survival. In a move that still puzzles historians, the ancestral Puebloanans abandoned the valley floors and retreated into the most inaccessible places imaginable. They began building their homes inside the massive arched alcoves of sheer canyon walls. This was the era of the cliff dwellings, iconic sites like Mesa Verde's Cliff Palace. These weren't just homes, they were masterpieces of defensive architecture. To enter, one had to climb precarious hand and footholds carved into the vertical rock, or scale long wooden ladders that could be pulled up at a moment's notice. Living in the cliffs offered shade from the blistering sun and protection from rising tensions, but it also signaled a society under immense pressure. The once peaceful traders were now a people living on the edge, their beautiful cities turned into high-altitude fortresses. The reason for this retreat became clear as the sky turned to brass. In 1276, the Great Drought began, a brutal 24-year span where the rain simply stopped. The 3 sisters, corn, beans, and squash, withered in the fields. The forests were depleted for building timber, and the wild game had been overhunted. As the soil turned to dust, the social fabric began to fray. Evidence of conflict and desperate migrations suggests that the once unified culture was fracturing under the weight of starvation and fear. By the year 1290, the decision was made. One by one, the fires in the kivas were extinguished. They packed only what they could carry: sacred objects, small stores of seed, and the clothes on their backs. They left their magnificent pottery on the floors and their granaries half full, as if they expected to return. But they never did. Within a single generation, the great cliff cities were ghost towns, left to the wind and the ravens. The era of the Four Corners had ended, and the great migration into the unknown had begun.
The eternal path. The year is 1300. The great houses of Chaco are empty. The ladders of Mesa Verde have been pulled up for the last time. A silence so profound it feels heavy has settled over the Four Corners. For centuries, Western explorers called this a mystery, the story of a people who simply vanished into the desert haze. They looked at the abandoned sandals, the stored corn, and the intact pottery, and they saw a tragedy. They saw a dead end. But they were looking at the story through the wrong lens. To understand the final chapter of the ancestral Puebloans, we must stop looking at the ruins and start looking at the roads. Because the story didn't end in the 13th century, it merely changed direction. The Great Exodus. The migration was not a panicked flight, it was a deliberate, spiritual, and agonizingly difficult journey. Thousands of people, elders carrying sacred stones, mothers with infants strapped to their backs, and priests carrying the seeds of the future, began a long walk toward the south and the east. They were following an ancient prophecy, a search for what they called the middle place. Imagine the scene, a column of people stretching for miles across the sun-scorched earth. They weren't just fleeing a drought, they were seeking a new way to live. The old system, the rigid, star-aligned hierarchy of Chaco, had failed them. The climate had shifted, and their gods seemed to have fallen silent in the canyons. They moved toward the Rio Grande Valley in New Mexico and the high mesas of Arizona. They were moving toward water, yes, but they were also moving toward a more democratic, communal way of life. The Rio Grande and the Little Colorado. As they settled in their new homes, the architecture changed. Gone were the isolated fortresses in the cliffs. In their place rose the great plazas of the Rio Grande. They built apartment-style complexes that faced inward toward a central courtyard where the community could gather as one. They traded the vertical isolation of the canyons for the horizontal connection of the river valleys. Here, they refined their agricultural techniques, using the Rio Grande's waters to irrigate their fields in ways their ancestors could only dream of. They became the masters of the three sisters once again, corn, beans, and squash, but with a newfound resilience. They had survived the collapse of their world, and they had emerged stronger. They were no longer the ancestral Puebloans. They were becoming the Pueblo peoples that the Spanish explorers would encounter centuries later.
The living breath, Hopi and Zuni. To this day, if you travel to the Hopi Mesas in Arizona or the Zuni Pueblo in New Mexico, you are not looking at a historical reenactment. You are looking at the oldest continuously inhabited communities in North America. The blood that flows through the veins of a Hopi farmer today is the same blood that built the Sun Dagger at Chaco Canyon. The mystery of their disappearance is a myth created by those who didn't know where to look. When you ask a modern Pueblo person where their ancestors went, they will gesture to the very ground they stand on. They will tell you that the ancestors never left. They are in the rain that falls on the corn, the wind that whistles through the kivas, and the song sung during the winter solstice. Their culture didn't die, it evolved. They traded the grandeur of stone for the endurance of spirit. The lesson of the stones. As we look back at this 1,500-year saga, what is the ultimate takeaway for us, the modern viewers? The ancestral Puebloans remind us of the fragile thinness of the ice we walk upon. They remind us that no matter how great our technology, no matter how precise our understanding of the stars, we are ultimately guests of the Earth, not its masters. They faced a climate that turned against them. They faced the depletion of their forests and the drying of their springs. But instead of perishing, they adapted. They let go of their massive stone monuments and their complicated hierarchies to save the one thing that truly mattered, their people and their prayers. They chose survival over ego. The echo in the canyon. The sun sets today over the empty windows of Cliff Palace, casting long golden shadows across the sandstone. The dust motes dance in the light, where children once played and where weavers once sat. It is a place of profound beauty and haunting loneliness. But it is not a graveyard. The story of the ancestral Puebloans is a cycle, not a line. It is a story of rising from the earth, reaching for the stars, and returning to the heart of the community. As the wind echoes through the empty plazas of Chaco, it carries a message for the modern world. Nothing is permanent, but everything is connected. The stone spirits are still there,